A Plaguelands Media production.
Hey everyone, this is Hugh from Plaguelands Media bringing you another book review. This time I am looking at American Vampire. This is a series written by Scott Snyder, who did an amazing run on the New 52 Batman comics. There are also some Stephen King parts in here. I believe Stephen King does the Wild West side of things. Now, we are continuing with our Plaguelands Media Horror Month. One moment. So this is a book that I have been itching to share with you. I'm a huge fan of this series, and I'm just so happy that now is the perfect time to jump right into one of the best vampire comic books out there. So let's just get right into the next episode of So this is American Vampire. Fantastic cover, as you can see. So let's get straight into the story. So chapter 1 starts in July 1925, 30 miles east of Los Angeles. We have a car driven by someone mysterious. They have a body in the car, which they drag out and dump into some kind of a pit in the middle of the desert. It then flashes back to 3 days prior. We have these two actresses, Pearl and Hattie, and they are having a discussion on what made them want to become actresses in the first place. Pearl talks about seeing A Trip to the Moon, which is a film that was created in 1902, I believe, by George Méliès. Probably the first science fiction film, and Hattie kind of mocks her. Everyone uses the old Trip to the Moon story of why they want to become an actress. Pearl questions her, and she says it was seeing Florence Turner in Romeo and Juliet for the first time. That version of Romeo and Juliet actually was released in 1912, I believe. The Florence Turner version was released in 1912. We get the sense that they're very good friends, which we see when they come back to their apartment, so they're actually roommates. And we have a figure sitting on a deck chair. This is Skinner Sweet, who kind of jokingly talks with them. We find out that Pearl, the main character, is working many jobs just to, pay the rent and whatnot, and also to cover her friend Hattie, who is a little bit of a deadbeat at this point. She's working as a cigarette girl at a club. As she's leaving the club, she comes across Henry, who asks her for coffee. She constantly says no, but they walk and talk anyway. On the set of the movie that they're filming, Pearl is asked to run some lines with the main actor, Chase Hamilton, I believe his name is. And Pearl and Hattie kind of joke about how attractive Chase Hamilton is. So they run the lines, and then Chase invites her to a party by the film's producer, a man by the name of Block. He gives her the address Later on, Skinner Sweet is still sitting by the pool, and he has some words with Pearl. Basically warns her about going to the party. He says that he is familiar with Mr. Block and that he is not to be trusted. But of course, Pearl and Hattie ignore him and they go to the party itself. At the party, Pearl is introduced to the producer of the film, Mr. Block, and shown into a room with all of his cronies, where they then proceed to attack her because they are in fact vampires. At this point, we shift back to the Wild West, and we have an author who is talking about a book that he wrote called Bad Blood, where he talks about the life of Skinner Sweet. So we have a train where Skinner is in fact a prisoner. He is a notorious bank robber, highwayman, and Mr. Book, who is one of the Pinkerton detectives, has actually captured him, and he's trying to find out where his gang members are. They are, of course, waiting for the train to come around the bend. At this point, we get the owner of the bank and the railroad that Skinner Sweet and his gang robbed. He is the one that has him captive. He wants to make an example of Skinner Sweet. No one can steal from him. And Skinner Sweet keeps asking for this piece of candy that he has in his hat. He wants it, so Mr. Book gets it for him. Then we get some visions of the bank robbery itself, where a few people died. Skinner Sweet gets his candy and subsequently sucks the candy down to make a point, which he then uses to unlock his handcuffs. He then attacks the people in the train, which gets derailed by the gang members. Skinner Sweet alludes to the fact that he has actually sent a bottle of wine to Book's wife, and that there may be something that he has tampered with in the wine itself. Of course, Book takes this badly, as you would expect him to. And the owner of the bank is shot, but doesn't actually die. And the author of Bad Blood kind of witnesses this. This is where we get the idea that the owner of the bank is actually a vampire. And he is going to take his revenge on Skinner Sweet. At this point, some of his blood gets on Skinner, but he kind of shrugs it off, doesn't really care. And Book is kind of revived, and the author pretty much tags along with them as they go about their ways. And you can see Skinner Sweet laying there, red eyes, kind of a bit of a smile on his face. And then we see the author of the book Bad Blood through the ages 1880, 1909, and then 1925. And that leads us in to Chapter 2 of American Vampire. At this point, Henry has come to visit with Pearl. Hattie answers the door, and they discover that Pearl has not been in her bed. Pearl, in fact, is staggering through the desert. Henry and Hattie find her. They are driving to the mansion where Mr. Block had his party at. And they find her in quite a state, actually. So they take her to the hospital where the doctor says, there's nothing we can do. Pearl is dying. You best let her relatives know so that they can come and say their goodbyes. As she lays dying in her bed, Skinner Sweet appears, knowing full well exactly what Block is, and basically turns her into a vampire. Here we see a little bit of her dream. Her father was a farmer who grew black sunflowers. She has a little bit of a nightmare. She ultimately wakes up in the morgue, not really understanding what is going on. She manages to get back home where she finds Skinner Sweet waiting for her. He explains what he did, how he turned her, how that there are different types of vampires. Mr. Block, of course, being European, and Skinner and Pearl are now American vampires. They don't have the same weaknesses as the European vampires. He explains what he did and why he did it, and basically lets her go on her merry way to work it out for herself. But he does leave her a list of their strengths and their weaknesses. He also leaves her a gift in her closet. Chase Hamilton, the actor that set her up at the party, is there. Pearl at this stage realizes that Chase Hamilton knew exactly what was going to happen to her, and so she decides to just take it out on him, murdering him and feasting on his blood. She leaves his body in his dressing room to be found the next day. We then move into the past again. This is more of Skinner Sweet's backstory, where Skinner Sweet has been buried. The detective Book knows what he did. His wife has died from the tainted wine, so he goes to Skinner Sweet's grave and pisses on it as a final form of revenge. The European vampires gather together. They are worried that some of this dude's blood got on Skinner Sweet and thus would transform him into a new type of vampire. But he's like, man, don't worry about it. It's all good. They are building a dam so that they can kind of monopolize on the land and the money. The author decides to follow Book as he goes on his kind of journeys, documenting exactly what he is doing. At this point, Skinner Sweet kind of wakes up. He manages to catch a rat that has gnawed its way into his coffin and eat it for some sustenance. The town of Stillwater gets flooded as the dam breaks, and so Skinner Sweet is kind of underwater now. The detectives are kind of going about their way, and Book's partner gets married, and Book is the godfather of the daughter. It's a kind of a little weird, twisted family reunion type thing here. So people come to the town of Stillwater that is flooded now in order to try and get some goods. They are banking on finding the grave of the notorious bandit Skinner Sweet. But as we know, he is a vampire, so he wakes up and attacks the divers, thus coming out of the water, and he is now out and about. And we move into chapter 3, where Hattie believes Pearl is dead, but Pearl comes to see her and reveals that she is not. But she is kind of out for revenge, so to speak. The vampires now are worried about Skinner Sweet, that he is out, and they want to track him down. So they send one of their kind out in a car, which is ambushed by Pearl, who attacks them, realizing that they are responsible for her condition. She completely destroys the car and starts to kind of taunt the vampire that is in the car, this woman. She wants her to burn in the sunlight, but she ultimately waits until sundown so she can have a real confrontation. Now, it's at this point that we get the real understanding that the American vampires are different from the European vampires. They aren't hindered by sunlight and things like that. Pearl and this woman fight, and this woman is ultimately impaled on a cactus. The thorns of a cactus, of course, are made from wood, and so she ends up dying. She goes and finds Henry. She wants to let Henry know exactly what is happening, what's going on with her. And at first, Henry doesn't believe her, but he starts to kind of come around to her story. And he says that we will go and get revenge together. He starts to crank his car, or she's in the driver's seat, but she drives off with it, ultimately leaving him by the side of the road. She is out for blood. At this point, the author of Bad Blood, who is talking about the book, is kind of getting heckled by the audience. And we go back to 1909, where Skinner Sweet has come back to town. I was calling it Stillwater. I should have been calling it Lakeview. I don't know why I called it Stillwater. It's a Call of Cthulhu thing, but just ignore that for now. He breaks into a candy store because he does have a sweet tooth, and he ends up killing the owner of the candy store. He can't understand why everything is different. He meets two police officers. He makes very short work of them, and ultimately just decimates this town. The European vampires are frightened because Skinner Sweet doesn't seem to have their vulnerabilities. And so they send all their forces out, but he ends up pretty much just decimating them as well. And so the author of the book kind of describes all of this through his narration. The European vampires decide to kind of hightail it out of town, just, getting the fuck out of there. And in the meantime, Skinner Sweet has holed himself up in a mine, and people that are after him kind of realize that he is there, so they've got him trapped. Okay, we move into chapter 4, where we find out how Pearl and Hattie first meet. Pearl is working at a diner. Hattie's new in town, and they kind of hit it off that way. Hattie, at this point, has been captured by the European vampires, so Pearl goes to kind of get her back. and they try to hash out some kind of a deal. But Hattie is in on it, and she stabs Pearl in the back. Hattie is the one that wants to live forever. She's the one that wants to be immortal, and Pearl can't believe what Hattie has actually done by betraying her like this. The European vampires attack Pearl. They are about to kill her when Henry comes in and saves the day. One of the vampires jumps on the roof of the car. Pearl manages to basically get him off, but she is incredibly weak, and Henry says, "You can feed on me to get your strength back." This paralyzes Henry. Pearl basically says, "Let me do all the work, you dirty, dirty little thing." And this is where we find out that Henry was in fact in the military and that he knows what is worth fighting for. Good old Henry. Henry says he's not going to leave Pearl. They're in this battle together. We are going to do this together. Then we go back to the past where Skinner Sweet is in the mine. Book has come back to take him out, followed by his goddaughter and the author who is there to kind of document everything. Skinner Sweet is just waiting for them. And they kind of get into a little bit of a back and forth here at this point, trying to get Skinner Sweet to come out of the cave. The mine, I should say. So Book goes in there, but before he does, his goddaughter kisses him, and Book realizes that she is in love with him. He has mixed feelings about this because he is her godfather, but ultimately he goes in there and confronts Skinner Sweet, who he initially captured in the past. Skinner Sweet is about to kill him when the goddaughter comes in and shoots him to protect the man that she loves. And Skinner Sweet flees, but not after some of his blood gets into Book himself. And we move on to chapter 5. So at this point, they are going after the European vampires, Henry and Pearl. They've prepared, they've made weapons and whatnot. So they track them down and they go in and they basically start a big brouhaha fighting all of the European vampires. Henry is captured and the head vampire basically gives Pearl an ultimatum. She decides to smash the ceiling, thus bringing sunlight in and killing the vampire and saving Henry. At this point, she confronts Hattie, who has been turned into a vampire herself. That was what she wanted. And they end up fighting. And Pearl kills Hattie with the star from the dressing room. A very fitting way to die. Pearl and Henry are talking about their future. And she sees Skinner Sweet, who has just come to say his goodbyes. And she is going to be left alone from now on. And Henry and Pearl make plans. Basically, what are we going to do? We're going to be together. Yada, yada, yada. Very fitting ending to the story itself. Now we go back to the author. He's being heckled, and someone in the audience says, "Can you just shut the fuck up and let the man speak?" And we see that it is, in fact, Skinner Sweet listening to this author's version of events. Book has discovered that he has the vampiric disease in him, and he tries his best to fight it, but he ultimately can't. So he asks his wife, who was his goddaughter, please let me die. I don't know how long I can fight this disease. Skinner Sweet, no one really knows what happened to him because he was buried in the mine after Book and the others went for him. But he's ultimately dug up and goes on another killing spree. The Book and his wife have one last night together. The European vampires discuss kind of what is happening, but Skinner Sweet goes there to confront them, and they try to make a deal with him, but he doesn't accept their deal. Instead, he drags the leader out into the sunlight to be killed. Book and his wife share a tender moment before Book ends up killing himself. And what he doesn't realize is that his wife was pregnant. She has a child to him. And as the author is finishing his discussion of his book, Bad Blood, he is handed a note written by Skinner Sweet, basically saying, you are old and I am young for eternity. So I let you live to suffer and die. Why not? What better revenge is there than that? Here's an autograph for you. And so he's taunting him. And then as he leaves the place where the author is giving his talk, there are two women standing across the road, and one of them is Book's wife, and she's with her daughter, and she's saying, that is the man that killed your father. And then we have an afterword by Scott Snyder, some great cover art, some scripts and pages, and that is Volume 1 of American Vampire, one of my all-time favorite horror comics. I absolutely love this series. It is fantastic. And Scott Snyder, of course, did a great run on Batman, the New 52 Batman. Most notably, the A Death of the Family story arc, which is phenomenal. Raphael Albuquerque. Stephen King, of course, is Stephen King. How can you go wrong there? So, American Vampire, Volume 1. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, like, subscribe, leave a comment, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. But most importantly, stay safe, have a fantastic rest of your day, and of course, read a fucking book, people.